September 7th, 1940, 4:43 p.m. The Thames glitters under a late summer sun. The river is crowded, barges drifting, tugboats coughing smoke, dock workers shouting across the water. Somewhere near the Isle of Dogs, a radio crackles with dance music. Teacups clink. A child laughs. London, for one last quiet moment, is still London. Then the sirens begin. Not one, not two, hundreds, a rising metallic howl that rolls across the rooftops and down into the streets, bending the air itself. You can almost feel it in your chest before you hear it properly, the vibration, the warning, the command. Above the city, the sky darkens, not with clouds, but with aircraft. They come in formation, tight, disciplined, relentless. Heinkel H-111s, Dornier DO-17s, Junkers Ju-88s, the Luftwaffe. At first, some Londoners simply stare upward. They've heard the sirens before, false alarms, near misses, raids on the coast. This feels different. The sound alone tells them that. A deep, synchronized thunder, engines droning like a single mechanical heartbeat. A woman on Commercial Road drops her shopping basket. Oranges scatter across the pavement, rolling toward the gutter. She doesn't bend to pick them up. She runs. By 4:56 p.m., the first bombs fall. They don't scream as people expect. They whistle, a falling, tearing sound that seems to stretch time itself. Then the impact. The ground convulses. Brick walls burst outward. Windows disintegrate into clouds of glittering dust. The air fills with the taste of plaster, smoke, and something metallic you can't quite place. Fire follows. Within minutes, the docks are ablaze. Oil tanks erupt into towering columns of flame, black smoke boiling skyward, blotting out the sun. The Thames reflects it all, orange, red, furious, as if the river itself has caught fire. London is under full-scale attack. For the first time, civilians understand this is not a raid. This is annihilation. Underground, the shelters fill fast. People push down stairwells clutching children, blankets, and gas masks. Some bring pets, others bring nothing at all, just the clothes they're wearing and the look in their eyes. In Aldwych Station, railway clerks guide families onto the platforms with forced calm, their voices cracking just enough to betray the fear beneath. Keep moving, there's room further down. On the central line, men in work boots sit shoulder to shoulder with women in summer dresses. Someone begins to pray. Someone else tells a joke that doesn't land. Babies cry until they don't have the breath left. Above them, the city is being torn open. Bombs fall in waves, high explosives first, smashing roofs, rupturing water mains, shattering streets. Then incendiaries, thousands of them, raining down like sparks from a welder's torch, igniting attics, warehouses, entire rows of terraced houses. Fire brigades race from blaze to blaze, hoses trailing behind them like lifelines. They can't keep up. Water pressure fails as mains are destroyed. Men form bucket chains that evaporate in the heat before they reach the flames.
An auxiliary firefighter later says it felt like trying to put out the sun with a teacup. At St. Thomas's Hospital, nurses work by candlelight after the power fails. Operating theaters shake with each nearby detonation. Dust falls from the ceiling into open wounds. No one stops. No one leaves. Outside, a bus lies on its side, wheels still spinning slowly in the air. A milk cart burns. A church spire collapses inward, swallowed by smoke. And still the bombers come. By midnight, London is unrecognizable. From Hampstead to Woolwich, fires burn uncontrolled, merging into a single monstrous glow. Pilots over France can see it from across the channel, a blazing target marking itself. Down below, in a cramped shelter near Stepney, a dock worker named Albert Richards sits with his back against the wall, knees pulled tight to his chest. He has soot on his face, though he hasn't been outside since the first siren. His wife grips his hand so hard her knuckles have gone white. When a particularly close explosion rattles the shelter doors, someone shouts, "That's it! That's the end!" No one argues. The sound above is constant now, not individual bombs, but a continuous roar, collapsing buildings, roaring flames, anti-aircraft guns pounding back in defiance. The shelter smells of sweat, fear, and damp concrete. Hours pass, or minutes. Time loses meaning underground. And then, gradually, the noise begins to thin. The engines fade eastward. The anti-aircraft guns fall silent one by one. The shelter grows unbearably quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. People don't cheer. They don't speak at all. Not yet. Just before dawn, the all-clear sounds. A cautious, wavering note that feels almost unreal after the night that came before it. One by one, Londoners emerge from their shelters. They climb broken steps, push aside twisted doors, squint into a morning light filtered through smoke so thick it turns the sun into a dull red disk. And they stop, because the streets they knew are gone. Whole blocks lie flattened as if pressed into the earth by some colossal hand. Fires still burn unchecked, sending sparks drifting across the ruins. Telephone wires hang like dead vines. A piano sits in the open air, its keys exposed, one end buried under rubble. People search for landmarks, shops, pubs, corners that once anchored their sense of place. Many can't find them. A woman stands where her house used to be, staring at a pile of bricks that were, 12 hours ago, her kitchen wall. She doesn't cry. She just keeps saying, very softly, "We were here. We were here." In the East End, dock workers walk toward the river and find entire wharves erased, cranes twisted, ships sunk at their moorings. Oil is still burning on the water. And yet people are alive. A man emerges from a shelter on Cable Street, brushing dust from his coat. He looks up, sees the devastation, and lets out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "Well," he says to no one in particular, "they didn't finish the job." Others nod. Some laugh, short, shocked bursts of laughter that surprise even themselves.
Children kick through debris as if it were playground gravel. Someone starts a kettle on a makeshift stove amid the ruins. Tea is poured into chipped cups. The city, somehow, is still breathing. By the end of that first night, more than 400 civilians were dead. Thousands are injured. Entire neighborhoods have been scarred beyond recognition. And the bombing does not stop. Night after night, the Luftwaffe returns. September bleeds into October, October into November. 57 consecutive nights of bombing follow. The Blitz becomes a rhythm of survival. Sirens, shelters, fire, dawn. But something else begins to form in those early mornings as Londoners step out into the wreckage again and again. A realization. They look around and see destruction on a scale they never imagined, but they also see neighbors pulling each other from rubble. Wardens are checking names off lists, shopkeepers reopening with shattered windows boarded over, buses running detours through streets that no longer exist. They hear themselves say things they never expected to say. "Still standing, then. Could have been worse. We'll manage." It's not bravado. It's not ignorance. It's shock hardening into resolve. And as the smoke drifts upward over a wounded city, a question begins to take shape in the minds of both the bombed and the bombers. If this didn't break London, what will?
The second dawn comes quieter. September 8th, 1940, 6:12 a.m., Bethnal Green. A gray light creeps through the smoke, illuminating streets that look older somehow, stripped of their familiar edges, their confidence. The fires are still burning, but they no longer roar. They hiss, they smolder, they wait. Londoners step out again, not in a rush, not with panic, with purpose. A man in a bowler hat, his hat inexplicably intact, picks his way across rubble toward where his office once stood. He pauses, adjusts his tie, and keeps walking. A woman sweeps broken glass from her doorstep with a broom missing half its bristles. She hums as she works, though later she won't remember what tune it was. In the East End, air raid wardens move door to door, chalking symbols on walls. A plain white X for checked, a red slash for gas. 3 quick taps before entering, in case someone is alive beneath the debris. Anyone there? Sometimes a voice answers. Sometimes there is only silence. By mid-morning, the newspapers are out.
They're thinner now. Fewer pages, fewer photographs, but the headlines are bold, defiant. London stands firm, capital unbroken. Men read them standing amid ruins, holding the pages carefully so the ash doesn't smear the ink. At a bomb site near Poplar, a reporter scribbles notes while a woman tells him about her night in the shelter. She speaks calmly, almost clinically, describing the noise, the shaking, the moment she thought the ceiling would come down. "And when you came out?" he asks. She looks at him, genuinely puzzled. "Well," she says, "it was still here, wasn't it?" That phrase, "still here," begins to surface everywhere. In queues for bread, in shelters, on buses rerouted through devastation. It's said with surprise, with relief, sometimes with a touch of pride. A dock worker later tells a friend, "I thought we'd come up to nothing, but there was London, all battered, but there." That night, the bombers return. They always do. By now, people know the routine. Supper is eaten early, blackout curtains are checked twice, children are bundled toward shelters with practiced efficiency. Jokes circulate, dark, quick, a shield against the fear. Same seats as last night? Wouldn't miss it for the world. In the shelters, a strange kind of community forms. Regulars claim the same spots on the platform floors. Someone brings a harmonica. Another brings a deck of cards missing the Queen of Hearts. A school teacher organizes the children into imaginary lessons to distract them from the noise above. When the bombs fall close, conversations stop. Everyone waits, counts, listens. Then the talking resumes, not because the fear is gone, but because letting it rule feels like surrender. Over the following weeks, the Blitz grinds on. September turns colder. The air underground grows damp, heavy with breath and bodies. People sleep sitting up, heads lolling onto strangers' shoulders. Babies are born in tube stations. Notices appear on walls: no spitting, keep moving, silence during raids, as if order itself might hold the city together. Some shelters flood, others collapse. When a bomb strikes Balham Underground Station on October 14th, rupturing a water main, dozens drown in the darkness. The news spreads quickly, then quietly. There is grief. There is anger. And still, the shelters fill up again the next night, because above ground is worse. Civilians begin to speak differently now. Less shock, more reflection. A woman named Margaret Lewis, a typist from Holborn, writes in her diary, "I thought fear would make us small. Instead, it has made everything else smaller." A retired sergeant, Harold Finch, tells anyone who will listen, "I've seen shelling in France. This is worse,
but we know why we're here. That word, why, takes on weight.
People talk about it in the queues and the shelters, about Hitler, about invasion, about the idea that if London falls, everything falls. It's not propaganda when it's said like this. It's personal, immediate. This is their street, their city, and it is not finished. By October, the Luftwaffe shifts tactics. The raids come later, they last longer. Navigation improves, bombing grows more precise. Iconic targets, St. Paul's Cathedral, Buckingham Palace, and Westminster are repeatedly attacked. On December 29th, a raid ignites what becomes known as the Second Great Fire of London. Hundreds of incendiaries rain down around St. Paul's. Flames leap from roof to roof. The sky glows red again. Inside the cathedral, firefighters and volunteers form bucket lines along the roof, stamping out fires with sandbags as sparks fall like snow. At one point, the dome is silhouetted against a wall of flame, the cross at its peak shining faintly through the smoke. The photograph will travel the world. But on the ground, no one knows they're making history. They're just trying to save a building that feels like a promise. When dawn breaks, St. Paul's still stands. So does London. The comments begin to change. Less, "we survived," and more, "we will." A shopkeeper in Soho tells a BBC interviewer, "I don't think they understand us. You can't bomb people into giving up their homes." A factory worker shrugs and says, "If this is the worst they've got, we'll take it." These aren't speeches. They're not polished. They're said over rubble with tired eyes and cracked voices. And that's what makes them powerful, because they're true. But beneath the resilience, something else is growing. Exhaustion. Grief that hasn't had time to surface. Anger that simmers quietly. People are dying. Homes are gone. Entire lives have been erased in minutes. And yet, each morning, Londoners step back into the daylight, look around, and register again that the city is still there, battered, burned, unbroken. What they don't yet realize is that their words, casual, weary, defiant, are being heard far beyond the ruins, by allies, by enemies, and by a man in Berlin who is beginning to understand that London is not reacting the way it was supposed to. November 1940, early morning, a street near St. Pancras. A man stands in the rubble holding a door. It's an ordinary door, painted green, chipped along the edges, one hinge twisted loose. It leads nowhere now. The house it once belonged to has been peeled open, its rooms exposed like a dollhouse smashed by a careless hand. The man turns the door over, studies it, then leans it gently against a remaining wall, as if it still has a job to do.
A neighbor watches him and says, "Reckon you'll keep that?" The man shrugs. "Might need it." They both laugh, quietly, briefly. This is how London speaks now. By late autumn, the Blitz had settled into routine, if such a thing can exist. Sirens after dusk, shelters by night, ruins by morning. But the language of the people has changed. Early on, there was disbelief, then shock, then relief. Now there is something harder to define, a kind of astonishment that they are still alive, that the city is still functioning, that despite everything, London has not gone dark. A tram conductor named Elsie Thompson tells a mass observation interviewer, "I keep expecting to wake up and find we've all been moved somewhere else, like London's been taken away in the night." She hasn't missed a single shift. Foreign journalists roam the streets now, notebooks in hand, eyes wide. They expected hysteria, collapse, panic. Instead, they find queues for bread, for tea, for buses running on altered routes through bomb craters and debris. People wait patiently, stepping aside when stretchers pass. One American correspondent writes, "The most remarkable thing about London is not the destruction, it is the behavior of those who walk through it." Londoners overhear remarks like this and react with mild irritation.
Well, what else are we meant to do? Someone asks. The question is sincere. The shelters tell the real story. In the tube stations, conversations drift across platforms in the dark. People talk about lost houses, about missing neighbors, about whether the bombing will ever stop. But they also talk about football scores, about ration recipes, about rumors, some hopeful, some grim. One night, someone claims Coventry has been destroyed entirely. A man replies, "So have we, several times over." There is laughter, then silence as the bombs fall closer. And after, the talking resumes. Children adapt fastest. They play games in the shelters, counting explosions, pretending that tube is a submarine, drawing pictures of planes with crooked wings and falling bombs. Teachers notice it. Psychologists will later study it. At the time, parents simply watch and feel something twist inside their chests. Because if the children can adapt, maybe the city can too.
Not everyone copes. There are breakdowns. Quiet ones, loud ones, people who can no longer bring themselves to leave the shelters at all. People who wander bomb sites calling names that will never be answered. But these stories are rarely spoken aloud. Publicly, the tone remains restrained, controlled, British. When Buckingham Palace is bombed in September, Queen Elizabeth famously remarks that she can now look the East End in the face. The phrase spreads quickly. In the shelters, someone mutters, "Welcome to the club." Across the channel, German airmen return from their missions with reports that don't match expectations. The fires are visible, the destruction is undeniable, but the morale? Unclear. One Luftwaffe navigator writes in his log that London burns beautifully. Another adds, almost as an afterthought, that anti-aircraft fire has grown more accurate, that searchlights are improving, that the city seems ready. Ready. It's not a word they like. By December, something subtle has shifted. The raids continue, but the fear no longer spikes with the sirens. It settles. It becomes part of the background, like the weather, like winter itself. A civil servant named George Beard writes to his sister, "We do not ask anymore if London will survive, only how much of it will be left when we're done." It's not pessimism, it's resolved. Then, gradually, almost imperceptibly, the raids begin to thin. Not the end. Thin. Some nights are quieter. Some pass with only distant explosions. The all clear comes sooner. People notice, but don't comment. No one wants to tempt fate. In January 1941, after a relatively light night, a woman steps out of a shelter near Piccadilly and says, "Funny, isn't it?" "What is?" "I almost missed them." She laughs at herself, then stops, because she realizes she means it. The Blitz will not truly end until May, but Londoners don't know that yet.
What they do know, what they are beginning to say aloud, is that something extraordinary has happened. The city was meant to crack, to beg, to fall, and it didn't. One morning, a man stands outside a shattered pub and reads a chalk message someone has scrawled on the wall overnight. "We're still here." He nods once, because that says everything. And because deep down he knows something else now too. If London can survive this, what else can it endure? February 1941, 7:30 a.m. A cold, pale sunrise over the East End. Frost clings to broken brick and twisted metal, turning ruins into something almost beautiful, if you don't look too closely. Your breath fogs the air as you step out of a shelter and join the quiet procession of people heading home, or to what passes for home now. Something feels different. The night before had been bad, heavy bombs, fires, the familiar violence of it all. But this morning, as Londoners emerge into the daylight, there is no collective flinch, no stunned silence. Instead, movement. Men roll up sleeves, women tie scarves tighter. Someone drags a cart through rubble. Someone else hangs a sign on a half-standing shop front, open as usual. That's when it begins to sink in. Not all at once, not dramatically, but undeniably. In a small cafe near Farringdon, only the front wall is missing, and customers drink weak tea among the wreckage. The owner, Mrs. Kathleen Moore, apologizes for the lack of milk. "Cow hasn't made it in today," she says dryly. A man replies, "War won't wait for cows." They chuckle. Outside, a BBC reporter records street interviews. He expects anger, fear, fatigue. What he hears instead is astonishment. "I thought we'd be finished by Christmas. They threw everything at us. And yet..." The sentences trail off. They don't need endings. Across the city, the same realization is taking hold. The Luftwaffe has been bombing London for 5 months. 5 months of nightly terror. And the city still functions. Transport runs. Factories operate. Government offices open. The docks, battered as they are, still move goods. The underground, targeted repeatedly, continues to shelter millions and carry them to work by day. London has not only survived, it has adapted. The language people use reflects it. Early in the Blitz, Londoners spoke in the past tense. What was your street like? Where did you live? Now the future creeps back in. When we rebuild. After this is over. A bus driver tells passengers, "You'll see this'll all look different one day." Not if, when. The Germans notice too. Intercepted intelligence reports hint at frustration. The expected collapse has not come. Civil order remains intact. Morale, against all projections, appears stubbornly high.
The word unverständlich, incomprehensible, appears more than once. From Berlin, orders change, focus shifts, targets expand beyond London. The bombing becomes more scattered, less relentless. Londoners sense it before they understand it. Some nights the sirens don't sound at all. The silence is unnerving. People lie awake, listening, waiting for the familiar dread to return. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. In March, a woman named Edith Carter stands in line for bread near Whitechapel. A stranger ahead of her turns around and says, "Funny thing, ain't it?" "What is?" "I'm not scared anymore." Edith thinks about it, about the nights underground, about the fires, about the bodies pulled from rubble. Then she nods. "Nor am I." It's not bravado, it's survival. When the raids do come now, they're met with something new. Impatience. A man exiting a shelter after a short raid grumbles, "All that fuss for nothing." Another says, "They'll have to do better than that." It would have been unthinkable months earlier. And yet, beneath it all, the cost remains. By spring, tens of thousands are dead across Britain. Entire communities have been displaced. Trauma sits heavy, unspoken. But Londoners carry it differently now. They've learned something about themselves, something the bombs could not take away. A steel core. On May 10, 1941, one of the final major raids strikes London. Fires burn again. Westminster is hit. The House of Commons is damaged. The city bleeds one more time. But when morning comes, and it always does, people emerge and look around with weary familiarity. Someone says, "Is that it, then?" No one answers, but everyone feels it. The worst has passed. And in the weeks that follow, as the nights grow quieter, Londoners begin to say it out loud. not as a boast, as a fact. We lived through it. We're still here. We didn't break. They say it with surprise, with pride, with something like awe, because they know now, not from speeches or slogans, but from experience, that London has survived the Blitz, and so have they. But the final, lasting impact of those words, the way they echo beyond Britain, has only just begun. Summer 1941, a clear afternoon, Trafalgar Square. Sunlight touches the stone that is still blackened with soot, not as a boast, as a fact. We lived through it. We're still here. We didn't break. They say it with surprise, with pride, with something like awe, because they know now, not from speeches or slogans, but from experience, that London has survived the Blitz, and so have they. But the final, lasting impact of those words, the way they echo beyond Britain, has only just begun. Summer 1941, a clear afternoon, Trafalgar Square. Sunlight touches the stone that is still blackened with soot. Pigeons return in force, strutting across the pavement as if reclaiming territory. Buses rumble past carrying clerks, nurses, factory hands, people who months earlier were counting explosions in the dark. London exhales. And now, finally, people begin to talk. Not during raids, not in shelters, but afterward, about what it felt like to survive. A mass observation interviewer sits on a bench near the Strand, notebook balanced on his knee. He asks a simple question. How did you feel when you realized London had made it through? The answers come slowly, carefully, as if the speakers are discovering the truth in real time. One woman pauses for a long moment before saying, "I felt surprised. That's the honest thing. Surprised we were allowed to go on." A dock worker answers, "I thought there'd be a moment, trumpets maybe, but it just sort of happened." Others struggle to find words at all, because what do you call it when the thing meant to destroy you fails? Many talk about the mornings, not the bombs, the mornings after. A librarian from Bloomsbury says, "Every dawn felt like being given something back." A railway porter explains, "You'd come up, see the mess, and think, right, then, let's see what's left." That phrase appears again and again.
What's left? Not in despair, in curiosity. Some speak of shame, not survivor's guilt, something quieter. A woman whose house survived while her sisters did not says, "I kept thinking, why mine? I hadn't done anything special." Others speak of pride, though they often avoid the word. "We didn't panic," a man says, almost defensively. "We just carried on," as if carrying on were not extraordinary. Children, now older, remember it differently. A boy from Stepney recalls the shelters as an adventure that went on too long. A girl remembers the taste of dust in her mouth and the way adults pretended not to be afraid. "They were," she says years later, "they just didn't let us see it." That may be the clearest legacy of all. Not the fires, not the rubble, but the restraint. When asked directly, "Did you think Britain would fall?" most Londoners answer the same way. No. Not because they were certain, but because they refused to imagine it. To imagine collapse was to invite it in. So they didn't. Across the Channel, the failure of the Blitz is acknowledged quietly. The focus moves east. London fades as a target. But among those who lived through it, the experience never fades. It becomes a reference point, a measuring stick for hardship. Years later, during other crises, people will still say, "It's not like the Blitz," and everyone will understand what that means. In pubs rebuilt from ruins, men raise glasses and say little.
In kitchens patched together with salvaged doors, women plan futures. In streets where bomb craters have become playgrounds, children run. London does not celebrate surviving the Blitz.
It absorbs it, builds around it, lives on top of it. One final interview, recorded late in 1941. An elderly man, a veteran of the previous war, is asked what he thought when the bombing stopped. He smiles faintly. "I thought," he says, "well then, if that didn't finish us, I don't know what will." He looks away, toward the city, and for the first time his voice catches. Because for a while there, he adds softly, "I truly didn't think we'd see it standing again." London did, and in doing so, it taught its people something they would never forget. That endurance, spoken quietly and lived daily, can outlast even the darkest nights.